So welcome, James.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
It's my pleasure. I've heard quite a lot about Atlas bars, and I'm yet to try one actually, and I don't know that we can get them in Australia. Can we? Is that a thing? No.
I don't know if you can. You might be able to through some people who bring them across, but there's no one that I know of that you could get them through, unfortunately, yet in
Uh,
Australia.
I was in Hawaii in August, and I should have bloody tried one, but never mind. I've heard great things about it. So anyway, so you're in Manhattan. I'm in Australia. It's always that time zone issue that I've got to deal with podcasts, but I absolutely love it. James, what? I don't know. I'm excited. You seem very young.
Do I? Well, I guess I appreciate it. I think of age as more, it's more of a mindset, I think, than
Yeah.
anything else. Yeah, I think more and more age is being accepted as not necessarily the best measure of it isn't necessarily how many times you've gone around the sun, which is a bit arbitrary when you
Yeah.
think about it, but
Yeah.
really the state of your body. Because I know some people who have a calendar age of 30 or 40, but they're about 10 years older, and others who have the same calendar age but are about 10 years younger. And I'm sure if you think about anybody in your life, you can think of the same, where there's some people that seem a bit older than their age would suggest, and others that feel a
Yeah.
bit younger. So I try to do the right things to make the right choices to slow down that that process so I can basically stay feeling as good as possible for as long as possible.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely younger than me. Well, I'm 62, and I tell you what, I'm my body probably says 50, but my brain is probably 16. So I think
It's
that's
a good
what
place to
keeps you
be.
young.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Well, you're still young. You're Atlas Buzz. I mean, you can tell us all about it and how it's going, but ultimately, it's you're producing millions and millions and millions of bars, and it's grown, exponentially. So from where it started. So, do you want to tell us about Atlas Bars and how they got started?
Yeah, they actually got started technically over in your hemisphere.
Oh,
So I studied a couple of languages in university. I first started studying Arabic because the reason I chose Arabic was because I looked in my school catalog to see what the hardest language that they offered was, and it was Arabic. And so I was like, well, I'd only done Latin to that point, and
yeah,
you don't really speak Latin when you're learning it. And I was like, well, I want to try a spoken language, and if I'm going to do a language, I want to try a hard one because
yeah,
why not? So I did Arabic first, and then I realized that I had more interest in going abroad to Asia than I did to the Middle East, and so I switched to from Arabic to Mandarin about halfway through, and then as part of my studies, I went abroad to China for about 6 months, and I lived with a Chinese family in a homestay, which was great. And as part of that, going over there, I knew that I was into nutrition, and I knew that my diet was going to be pretty different than what it was
yeah,
in the States.
yeah,
And specifically, I knew that my protein was probably going to be a lot less, that I was going to be eating a lot more rice and buns, which I did, but
yeah.
I wanted to try and offset that a little bit, just like somewhat stay on track when I was over there. So I actually asked my mom to help me make a couple hundred bars that I brought with, and I thought bars because it needs to be convenient, it needs to be shelf stable. It's a
Yeah.
good kind of efficient way to pack a lot of nutrition in, and so I made couple hundred of them with her, put them into Tupperware containers, and then brought them over with me. And then I had them while I was over there. And I got back, and I never really thought when I brought them over to China with me, I was never really thinking like, oh, this is a trial run of a business. I was just making it for myself. And then I got back, and I was like, well, I think that there's probably if I had this kind of this gap that I could only fill by making it for myself, meaning uh, a product that was clean ingredients, good amount of protein, not a lot of sugar, that there's probably others that kind of share
Mm,
this itch that
yeah.
I figured I might as well see if I can turn it into something. So that was that was the short version of how everything got started.
Wow. And what do you mean clean? So what does a clean bar look like?
I think It's a good question because in the States, there's no universal definition of what clean means. It's not a
Mm.
term that's regulated by the FDA, or there's no body that defines formally what
Yeah.
it is. I think generally it's just understood to mean no artificial ingredients. You
Mm.
can more or less recognize and understand every ingredient that you read. There's nothing that you look at. I think that's probably for me, that's like the best test of it. Like if you can pronounce all the ingredients and there's nothing
Yeah.
in there that looks like it's like a medication,
Yeah. Yeah.
then that's probably a good baseline of okay, this, and also just the number of ingredients too.
Mm.
Because the number of ingredients, like if you take an apple, for instance, there's only one ingredient. It's just
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
apple. So usually the shorter the ingredients and the more simple the words in that ingredient list, the cleaner it is. I think that's a general rule of thumb.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. I remember somebody saying to me once, when you go shopping, if don't buy anything your grandmother wouldn't recognize.
Yeah.
It's kind of changing now with generations for me. That's apples and apples and fruit and veggies and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
that's
I
great.
remember it's funny you say that because my when I was I think 15, my one of my teachers said that exact same thing, and he said, "I don't eat anything my grandmother doesn't eat." And I was like, "Wow, that's a very simple but like helpful mental model to
It
use
is.
to as like a filter of like what should I and what should I not eat?" Because if you don't have any kind of filter at all, then you have no framework for making decisions about like,
Yep.
should I have this? Should I have that? And so I
Yep.
was like, that was the first thing I remember. It kind of like hit me, and I was like, wow, it's very simple and like that's very
Yeah.
easy.
It is easy. It's
Yeah,
I do not stick to that 100%, but I
yeah,
do it does it every time I go shopping, I pick up something and look at it and I think, oh God, no, Mama wouldn't know what the hell that was. Put it back there,
yeah.
and but the only thing my big filter is sugar. I do pick things up and look at how many grams of sugar in them, and but because sugar's so devastatingly bad. I don't think we realize how bad it is. But I cut out sugar about a year ago, like as in not completely, but really became conscious of it and stopped gutsing handfuls of jelly beans, that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. And the difference in my health has been phenomenal. I haven't got the same aches and pains and that sort of stuff. And I can
I was
think,
going to ask if you noticed a difference
yeah, I
between when you
can.
started and stopped. Did you notice
Yeah.
any changes in your behavior or your how you
Yeah.
feel?
Particularly my gut. I didn't have
Mm.
that tight bloated gut as much. Yeah. So that's been terrific. Now I just have a bit of psyllium husk every morning, and that's clean. That's cleared up everything. It's bloody fantastic. Just a little shot of that, but I love it. So when I'm really curious as to, so you go over to China and then you take these bars. First thing I have to ask actually before we move on, how long did you go to China for?
I actually left, much to my girlfriend's chagrin at the time. I left on Valentine's Day, which was not a nice Valentine's Day gift
Uh,
of in February, and I got back in like mid-June. So it was about 4 months total from February to June.
Okay, well then that validates my next question then is how did you keep them? I know Tupperware containers are fantastic, but how did you keep them from going moldy or, going off just in Tupperware containers?
It's a good question. And honestly, I think at the time we were just kind of lucky because we didn't really understand like food science principles.
Yep.
We were using at the time, I believe we had used honey in those initial ones, and honey is a very good preservative.
Oh,
So that's why a lot of
yeah.
like natural foods they use, whether it's like granola or something else, they'll use honey because one, it kind of passes that clean ingredient test.
Yep.
Consumers kind of accept it as like a
Yep.
clean sweetener, even though it's sugar syrup, but
Yeah.
it seems more natural than like a high fructose
Yep.
corn syrup. So I think the fact we were using honey really helped. And the rest of the ingredients were just nut butter, oats, and a couple of other things. But I think honestly, we just kind of got lucky that they didn't mold or anything like that. But it's a great question because that's really mold in particular is one of the hardest things to if you're creating a food product to combat against
Mm.
because if you really are trying to create a food product that kind of is on the shelf for a while, water and oxygen,
Yeah.
which is kind
Yeah.
of those are the two things that you have to watch out for, which is kind of counterintuitive because water and oxygen are like the building blocks
Yeah.
of life, but oxidation and water, which leads to mold, is what really can cut a product shelf life short.
Mm. Well, yeah. Honey. Honey is just that magical ingredient, isn't it? Honey's
It
magical,
is.
even though it is sugar. It's still like
Yeah.
it's incredible. Now what about? I also heard that you went on a trek for 100 miles for 6 days,
Mhm.
and you only took Atlas bars to test whether they would, well, not keep you alive because clearly you're not going to die in 6 days, but to fuel you appropriately, and it worked. That was your test.
Yeah, so the origination of it was I was just always frustrated with companies, and I still am with companies where the people who lead the organization wouldn't necessarily consume the product that they're
Yeah,
selling. To me,
yeah,
there's just something that it just feels like morally
yeah,
wrong if you are willing to sell this thing to thousands, millions of other people, then you yourself should be willing to consume it.
yeah.
And I used the example at the time of I was like, well, would the CEO of McDonald's like feel comfortable consuming McDonald's every day or giving it to their kids every day? And they say it like proudly on their signs. They say like billions and billions served.
Yeah.
But probably not, probably not. So I was like, well, I want to show that like we are a different company and the person behind it is also a very big consumer of the product. So
Yeah.
I was like, well, what could I do to demonstrate that? What if I just ate for like an entire week, all I ate was my product? And I was like, well, I could do that, but that's really not that hard. I can do that easily. And then I was like, well, what if I added on to that running 100 miles while only eating my product? So that was what it turned into. And I ended up doing, yeah, 100 miles I did it a day early. So in 6 days, it comes out to like 17 miles a day. And I had like, I think like high 70s or low 80s in terms of bars, and that was it. So it was a
Wow.
lot. Yeah, it was a
Wow.
lot.
But it fueled you appropriately, like it kept you going running,
Yeah,
because that's a lot of energy.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. No, it worked. Yeah, it worked, and it was a fun experiment. The first run that I did, actually, I ran. I had a flight to catch, so I ran from my apartment to the airport, which I didn't know you could do before. But I ran up to the airport with a backpack, and then I just got on the plane. Um, but yeah, it was a fun experiment.
Well, I wouldn't have wanted to be sitting next to you on the plane. You would have
Yeah.
stunk. Oh, maybe. Well, maybe that's just me. Anyway, so when you're in college, you know, because I believe you after this China thing, you decided to start making them at college. Were you making them on the premises, or were you making them still at your mum's house while you were at college?
So when I came back, I had 1 year left, and I decided if you're going to make any kind of product, you have to make the decision, am I going to make this myself or am I going to work with a manufacturer, or
Yeah,
what's called a
yeah,
contract manufacturer to make this? And I made the decision early on. I remember thinking about this, and I was thinking actually about the company Nike, and I was like, well, Nike, they've never manufactured their own product. They have always worked with
yeah,
contract manufacturers. Apple is actually the same way. They don't own any of their own manufacturing. And I was like, I think given that I'm a one-man show, I think that that probably makes the most sense because I need to focus on the sales and the marketing side of things. And if I'm manufacturing, then I
yeah,
will be spending all my time doing that and not the other
yeah,
side of things. So I found a manufacturer who helped, and it was a good thing too, because making a product or making something in your kitchen is very, very different than
yeah,
making it at a commercial scale. Like making I think a lot of people they can make a product in their kitchen and they're like, "Oh, this is a great product. I should sell it."
yeah,
And you can do that at like farmers markets, and you can make like a couple dozen cookies or something like that. But then to go from a couple dozen to like tens of thousands or
yeah,
millions, you got to the
yeah,
process is going to have to change just because the volumes you're working with are
yeah,
so much greater. So
yeah,
we worked with that contract manufacturer and made a couple of changes that we had to do just to make sure we could produce it. And then they helped make the first couple thousand bars. And I remember thinking, like, my worst case scenario was that if I wasn't able to sell any of these, I was just gonna have to eat them all myself. And I was very comfortable with that. I was like, hey, if that's my worst case scenario, that's fine.
yeah,
And so I worked for them to make it, and then I had the first shipment arrive about a week after I graduated from school, and then I hit the ground running, and I have not looked back since.
Wow. When you were getting them manufactured, what sort of marketing were you doing? Were you telling people, "Hey, this is coming, I've done the run," and or something like that? Like, how did you start getting people aware of Atlas bars?
I really didn't do a lot on the front end. I probably should have. And once I got them, I started to do it probably as old school as possible. I started to drive. I put them in the back of my Prius and I drove from gym to gym, like CrossFit gym in the Boston area, and basically just walked in the door and said like, "Hey, I created this product. Would you be open to me coming by and just handing some out to your members?" And most of them were, almost all of them were just like, "Sure, like if you want to, it's something cool for our members, and sure." And so I started to do that. It was a grind. It was a
Yeah.
grind doing that every day. But that's how I got the word out initially.
That's amazing. That people don't do that anymore. Actually, I think that's better.
No.
I think that's great, actually. And what
Yeah.
about how did you fund it? Because I did hear a whisper about your Uber driving to
Yeah.
make some money. How did that happen? Or what
That's
did
how
you
I
do?
funded it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had always worked, I'd always been, I guess, industrious is a word. I had worked jobs out there at college. I'd landscaped, I sold knives, I did Lyft, I did Uber. And so I had been Ubering before classes in school. I was just a very determined person. So I would get up at like 4:30. I would drive Uber. Sometimes I would miss class because I would get stuck in traffic on the way back, and I was able to save up enough money. And then I continued to do that once I graduated, and I just basically took all that money. I was living like a monk, so I didn't really have any expenses, and I just
Yeah.
took all that money that I made and just put into the company.
Wow. Living
Yeah.
like a monk. Have you read Jay Shetty's book?
Yeah, I think I have. Yeah, I've listened to a bunch of his podcasts. I'm pretty sure I've read his
Yeah.
book as well. I've read a couple like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, yeah.
So would you call yourself like at what age did you notice you were either entrepreneurial or super hardworking, like too much energy to work for work, like just, or do you really value money? Like because it depends what drives people. Some people are, I got to make a buck. I got to make a buck. It doesn't matter what I do. Other people are like, I just need entrepreneurial stuff. I just need to keep coming up with all these ideas. That's what drives me. And other people are just
Yeah.
addicted to working. Where do you see it?
It's a good question. I think the thing that has always just really that I just enjoy doing is just making things. I just love whether it was
Yep,
Legos in my childhood or
yep,
I would play with Beanie Babies for hours and
yep,
just like I just have always enjoyed, I'm a very visual person. I've always enjoyed making things like that. And as I've grown up, like that's basically been products. And I've also, as I've aged, I've realized that there are a lot of problems in the world, a lot of things that can be solved. And
yep,
to me, money is it's a tool that helps you to solve problems. It can
yep,
help you because you can create a company, basically a company, if you're doing it well, and if you're doing it, in my opinion, right, it's basically just a vehicle for just solving a problem at scale. And
yep,
you want to make money so that it can self-fund itself so that you're not dependent on
yep,
money from elsewhere. Otherwise, you're a nonprofit or you need some kind
yep,
of investors.
yep,
So I've viewed money as just something that gives you basically the option to solve, like really what my goals are now is just to get more money so I can try and help solve bigger problems. Like that's
mm,
pretty much it. I really have no interest in anything material because I just view the thing that I value most is my time, and
yep,
I feel that the more things that I would acquire, the less time I would have because the more
yep,
time you have to spend thinking about those things. So I
yeah.
really don't have much interest in that.
Well, I love that attitude. I love that. Well, when you said you want to move on to the next problems, what do you envision you might attack next? Well, I shouldn't say attack, approach.
That's a good question. There's a lot of things that I have
Mm,
right at this point. I probably have a couple of dozen, basically like fully fledged plans that are out there, but I need to continue to do this one and continue to grow it. But there's just a lot of, if you just think about the world, there's a lot of issues, affordable housing.
mm,
There's obviously the kind of climate issues. There's food food
Mm,
issues with our food supply chain, where basically the default in our food system now, at least in the States, has become food that it has calories, but it's pretty much devoid of nutrition.
yep.
What I mean by that is that it like if you consume a soda, for instance, you get calories and energy from that,
Mm,
but pretty much nothing else. And
mm,
that's very rare if you look at human history to
yeah.
get energy without nutrition, because if you were just consuming things from the world, there's always nutrients that comes with it. But because of processing, we've basically been able to innovate foods that deliver energy with all the nutrition stripped
Yeah.
out. So there's a lot of things, and yeah, that's why I'm just I just am excited to keep going, because I'm like, well, somebody's got to do it.
Yeah, that's that whole thing, isn't it? There's a problem. Someone should do it. Wait a minute. I am somebody.
Yeah.
I should do
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
exactly.
Which world issue is sort of closest to your heart?
Um, that's a good question. I mean, the one that honestly always stuck with me that just makes me frustrated is pollution. I
Mm,
don't really have a good solution to this yet. I grew up in the so I was a Boy Scout, and like one of the mottos in the Boy Scout is like leave the place better than you found it,
yeah,
or leave the
yeah.
world better than you found it. And that I've always viewed has really applied directly to pollution. It really it irks me when I go through like whether it's a park or some natural place, and
Mm,
there's pollution
mm,
that's there, because it's so simple, and it also like it's so easy to avoid.
yeah.
And it's yeah, it's we live in a very beautiful rare place. I mean, we
Mm,
haven't found another place
yeah.
like it yet in the universe. And
Yeah.
it yeah, I feel like it's not that hard of a solution to solve. It's just our default has become things like
Mm,
plastic, which it is kind of, when you think about it, if you drink like one bottle of water,
mm,
and then you throw out the bottle, and that bottle's there for thousands of years just for basically like 1 minute of convenience.
yeah.
It's a pretty odd thing when you think about it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't have anything for that yet. That's something but I think that there are some good solutions that are being worked on right now.
Mm,
So that's one that it would just be nice to have a more beautiful planet, I think.
I agree. And I don't know
Yeah.
why if every person just did that one little thing, did just that one little thing, it would just drop the problem,
Yeah.
not completely, but would just reduce it enough for it to be manageable. But convenience has become the key, hasn't it? Convenience is what can I do quick? What can I do now?
Yeah.
How can I have answer my prayers in the next minute? That type of thing.
Yeah.
And a world of over consuming. We do buy too much, and we do have too much. And
Yeah.
yeah, I get
There's
it.
actually there's a coincidentally, last night I was listening to an interview with Steve Irwin,
Mm,
who I really enjoyed his passion growing up. And to answer your question on money, he had a great response, which is like, I can't get enough money because I'm just going to buy up as much wilderness as possible so I can protect it. And that's
yep,
kind of how I like money is. It's
yep.
just a tool. Like a lot of people think like, oh, if you want money, you just want to like consume more material things. And it's like, well, you
No,
could do that, or you could use it
yep,
for other purposes. But
yep,
money's not good or bad. It's like a hammer. It's a tool. It can be used to
yep.
build a house, or it can be used to knock a house down.
Yeah, 100%. I
Yeah.
love that. Actually, I've got that up on my cupboard, which you can't see, but that's my number one vision, and I doubt if I'll ever get there, but I'm not going to give up on it, like as always possible, and that is to buy land, that can be held as animal sanctuaries, particularly for orangutans and that type of thing. So that's my number
Yeah.
one goal. I don't know if I'll ever get there, and you know what? I'm not going to say I won't. I doubt if I will, but you know what? It's still possible. Something could happen. Some magic could happen, and I'll never be able to do it currently. With what I've got and how I live with rescue animals and all that sort of stuff. They cost me a fortune, but it is my number one dream. So I would love to.
Yeah.
That would love to
That's an
think that.
admirable dream. It's a great dream.
Thank you. Yeah, I do give money to I support monthly plots of land, for orangutans and that
Yeah.
type of stuff. And I think just do the best you can. So if I can't buy land, well, I can sponsor it. You know, I can actually sponsor blocks and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. I think if we all just did that one little bit extra, I'm not trying to be self-righteous or criticize others, because I do understand that the world is convenient, you know, and because of social media and all the other pressures, we do want answers now. We do want it now. You know, what can I have now? But we've kind of lost ourselves. You know, we've lost that whole essence of human being, you know, and humanity, and yeah, it's sad. But anyway, you know what? I don't want to criticize people, because I remember years ago being vegan and putting up signs all around my desk when I worked at a big organization. And they were real harsh signs that were criticizing everyone else in the office. You know, it was like, you know, you're harming this one. Don't do animal experimentations because this and that, and, you know, and don't eat meat. This is cruel, and pictures of cows being slaughtered. Then what I realized, and I hate this, but what I realized is that I was actually driving people towards it because they were getting angry with me. You know, and
Yeah.
then I took and this is where it's hard for activists, because I took the back road then, and it was kind of like, well, I'm going to lead by example, you know, and when I go out for dinner, I'm just going to get my dinner, and then I'll just do my thing. But it seems passive, you know, so I was having a bit of conflict with the passivity of it. But what I found was people started then asking me, why don't you eat meat? You know, why are you doing this? Why is that? And then they said, yeah, actually that's true. I might try that. And I thought, wow, you know, it was such a different approach by just being passive, even though I was conflicted by being passive. But nah, funny old world we live in, isn't it, James? I don't know.
It is, yeah. It is, yeah. Well, I think that was a kind of a wise conclusion that you came to. It does seem that shame is a pretty ineffective way to try and convince people to
Yeah,
come to your
yeah,
side, because they're automatically on the whatever it is, they're automatically on the defensive. And
yeah,
I think what you kind of shifted to makes a lot of sense. Just saying, hey, this is what I'm doing and it works for me, and these are the reasons why I'm doing it, and just having a conversation, and then somebody's like, oh, that actually makes sense. Maybe I'll try that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Rather than punching people in the face.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I think when you get so passionate about something, you're super frustrated. You know, like
Yeah.
if like let's say you're in a national park and you see someone throw away a McDonald's cup, you know, have their Coke and piff the cup, and you would want to say, listen, you asshole, pick that bloody cup up, you know, but you can't imagine yourself going, oh, look at me, I've got a cup and I'm putting it in the bin. You know what I mean? Like your
Yeah.
frustration is so damn, yeah. But anyway, doesn't matter. People just keep doing the right thing, and it makes a difference. Well, where did you? Also believe you refused a lot of outside um, funding. You know, like from in bigger investors. Did you get many opportunities? Were people coming at you with wanting to invest?
So initially, I was able to get the company from zero to over a couple million in sales just by myself,
Wow.
just from doing what I was doing, that grind. And then at a certain point, I did have conversations with people, and there are actually people who initially had basically said no, and I'm not interested, and I wanted them to be involved in the brand because I thought that they could be helpful. So I did end up working with them and taking an investment like 3 years in or so. But that's something that if you're starting a business, that's what I would call it's kind of a one-way decision, because once you
Mm.
do it, it's hard to undo. And
Yeah.
so you want to make sure that when you do it, you're doing it with people that, I mean, people say like it's akin to getting married, and that's not wrong because you
Yeah.
are basically in a contractual obligation with them, just like you are with a marriage. But the right investors, I think, can be really helpful, and the wrong ones can be really harmful.
Harmful. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think it's important to also, yeah, just know that if you are in a company, you have basically 100 percentage points of that company, and every percentage point you sell is one less that you have.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's an important thing to keep in mind if you are considering that.
And you've really got to know that you're aligned with them, don't you? Or that
You
they're
do,
aligned
yeah.
with you. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
Not easy either, because there's a lot of shams out there, a lot of people out there that just want to make money, and they don't have the ethics that's sitting behind it. So it's a fair bit of homework on your part, to make sure that it is an alignment.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Mm,
integrity is kind of
mm,
knowing that you can trust what somebody is saying is unfortunately you would expect that to be kind of table stakes for any interaction, but it's not necessarily. And so you should prioritize that, I think, above anything else if you are considering going into business with somebody.
mm. There are going to be a lot of people listening to this, who, of course, they're listening because they've got an idea and they haven't quite had the courage, to kickstart it. Even though there's many inspiring guests come on here sharing that they did, and they did it. What it doesn't sound to me like you had many fears. It sounds to me like you're just going to go, have a crack anyway, regardless. But what about those people that are worried that it wouldn't work? What sort of things would you want them to know?
I would say that I actually had many fears. Like every day I was facing uncertainty. And when people have asked me before, what's the hardest part about starting something, my answer has always been your own psychology,
Mm,
because the thing that is both the thing that's empowering about doing your own thing is also the thing that's very intimidating, which is that you have to write your own script. Like if you go into a company and you're working for a company, you're like, okay, I wake up, I go in at 8 o'clock, I know what I'm doing from like 8 to 5, and I basically know what like my next 10 years could look like. I work here and then I get promoted, and
yeah,
it's a written out script for you. So it's cognitively comfortable because you know what to expect.
yeah,
But if you're doing your own thing, you don't have really any such script. And
yeah,
so the mind does not like uncertainty. And so
yeah.
you have to basically convince yourself that what you're doing has some kind of script to it. So I used a lot of different tools, like the one that I mentioned earlier, when I was like setting my worst case scenario. And I was like, worst case scenario, okay, if my worst case scenario is that, then I don't really have any fear of failure, because the worst case is actually a pretty good case. I'm
Yeah.
not like betting my life savings on it. I'm not betting my house on it. And so the worst case scenario is really not that bad. And that's an exercise that I remember getting from somebody else, that if you can make the worst case scenario very clear and define that, and if
Mm,
you can be okay with that, then
mm,
that really helps alleviate a lot of anxiety and stress, because then you know what the worst case, it's not some like ambiguous like, oh, what happens if I fail? You're like, well, this is what happens if I fail, and it's really not that bad.
yeah.
Um, so that was a really helpful tool for me. And the other thing that I used to really propel me was I just I've been a long-term thinker for a long time, as long as I can remember, really. And I was just I still am afraid of the question of what if, like,
Mm,
if I got to the end of my life and I look back and I was like, oh man, what if I had
yeah.
just done this? What if I had
Yeah.
just taken that chance? And if you look at
Mm,
it's sad to me. If you look at a lot of accounts of people who have been with others, who have cared for others near the end of their life, it's I think the most common thing is just regrets of things that people didn't do. They didn't have the
mm,
courage to do XYZ,
yeah.
and in their final days moments, they are regretting that. And
Mm,
I, even though the it's scary to do it today and in the moment, I would rather take that than the pain
yeah.
of the regret years in the future, because that pain is harder to get through
Yeah.
than doing the uncertainty of today.
It is, isn't it funny? Because it is harder to live with that regret than the regret of what you did do. And yet we always avoid the pain. We always avoid acute pain, but
Yeah.
we're happy to absorb chronic pain, which is actually far more disabling. We're a funny lot, aren't we, really? But
We
I
are.
like to think exactly what you said, but I like to think, well, what's your plan B? And there are people who like, yeah, but I've got a secure job. What if and by the way, I don't want people to just jump to leave their secure job and just take a chance. I'd like to think they can reduce a day and take a chance on that day, and do it a little bit more carefully. But I always say to them, well, go and stack shelves in a supermarket. Like at the end of the day, if it fails, there's always a job out there. There's always something. So you've got to think about what's your greatest fear, and the fear is, well, I haven't got an income. But where could you
Yeah.
get an income? well, I suppose I could get an income from a supermarket. I'm not saying a supermarket's the worst thing in the world, but I'm just saying, do you know there are jobs out, and then that
Yeah.
when they think about that, they're like, yeah, I suppose I could. I wouldn't be fulfilled. And I'm like, no, you wouldn't be fulfilled, but you've got an income, and then you can think about, well, what will make you fulfilled, and you can start thinking about it. But at the end of the day, we're not going to die. Do you know when? Well,
Yeah.
mostly depends what we're doing, but mostly. So when you are selling, like now you've got this great big plant. Do you know that? Yeah, well, this is what I understand. Tell me if I'm wrong. I understand now you've got Atlas Bars as a big factory, as a big outlet or big manufacturing plant. Is that true? Because you kind of said something different before.
So we still work with another manufacturer who they manufacture. We actually were there today manufacturing with them. So we don't own the equipment. They do the manufacturing
Oh,
for us,
still, yeah.
but we manufacture, I guess millions of bars there every year.
Wow. And how much has when did it start?
The first year, so I graduated college in 2017. So the first full year was 2018.
Wow. So now
Yeah.
we're 8 years, 7 years in, and
Yeah.
and so it's scaled phenomenally.
I didn't appreciate, honestly, uh, I didn't appreciate early on how abnormal it was. I remember in my first year, the first year, which was a partial year, I think we did like $39,000 in sales. And then the next year it was over 600,000 and it was still just me. And I didn't
Wow.
realize how that's not normal because it was my first business.
Yep.
And so I didn't, I definitely made a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes that I've since learned from, hopefully. But yeah, that initial trajectory, if you are listening, you do have a business that happens to, make sure you appreciate it because it's not normal.
It's not normal. And most businesses fail. 80% of
Yeah.
businesses fail in the first few years, but 600,000 and you made a lot of mistakes. Well, that's
Yes.
still pretty, that's amazing. That is amazing. And they're not expensive products. So when you're selling reasonably cheap products, they're not
Yeah.
$200 products. Um, you've got to sell a lot of them. Like you've really got to move a lot to get 600,000. It's not two
Yeah.
cars. It's
It's
a
price
it's a
times volume. Yeah.
it is. So
Yeah.
how do you reckon it because you're just taking them around to gyms in Manhattan, how did it spread? How did do you know that, or was it
Yeah,
like
no, I knew that early on that my strategy of going around to different places that was never going to be a sustainable,
mm,
scalable strategy because I can only be in one place at
yeah,
once. So it was
yeah,
always going to be limited by my time. So I thought that, well, given that I'm one person, like what are my options for really growing this with the limited kind of resources that I have? And I always thought that e-commerce was going to be the way to do that because you can have a single store, a website that millions of people, millions and millions of
yeah,
people can visit with just one store. And you can't like that's not possible with the physical
yeah,
store.
yeah,
You have to have, in order to service millions of people, you have to have many, many stores to
yeah.
do that. So that was where I always suspected that the company, if it was successful, was going to be able to grow.
So where do they get shipped from? Where do those orders go to and get shipped from? 'Cause certainly not your garage or the back of your car.
Initially, it was my garage. Yeah, for the
Yeah.
first two
Yeah.
years, I spent many, many, many hours in a garage by myself, packing boxes. Probably too many. One of the shifts that I made is I thought it was, I guess, honorable, to
Yeah.
be the like CEO and to be packing boxes
Yeah.
of customer orders and all of that. And I did that for a long time. But I think my mistake there was not realizing that my time was since I was the only person in the company, that if I was spending 5 hours packing boxes,
Yeah.
that was 5 hours that I couldn't be spending doing other things to help
Yeah.
grow the
Yeah.
business. So initially it was literally from my parents' garage. There was actually one weekend where we had a backlog of orders, and I spent the entire weekend in the back of a U-Haul truck, and I did like it was like 800 or 900 orders by myself
Oh, wow.
to get them out. So yeah, I've packed a lot of orders.
Wow. Do you see yourself ever removing yourself as a CEO and or exiting from the company or selling it off or
It's hard to know what future me would want to do.
mm,
It's
mm,
hard to know what future me would want to do. I think that if there's a point where I don't wake up and my energy isn't fully in it, then I would be doing a disservice to the company if I continue to stay in a role that I wasn't fully committed to.
mm,
So right now I spend many hours a day on all the things we're working on. I'm very excited about what we're working on because I think we're at a special time. But as I've shared, I have a lot of different things that bounce around in my head, and
mm.
um, every hour I would spend on Atlas is an hour that I wouldn't be able to spend on something else. So who knows at this point?
Yeah. And I understand that. I've got about 12 projects going at the same time too, and I've been training myself to put a bloody lid on it. And
Yeah,
so you can't do that, Karen. You just can't do everything. So now you've got to choose something, and you've got to get rid of some babies. Do you know? And you, so
yeah,
I completely get it. And time is important. And I'll tell you what, as you get older, time is way more. You really start to think, shit, time is really critical. And I
yeah,
don't want to be doing half of the things I'm doing, but then you've got to get brutal with what you shift, what you move on and that kind of thing. But I always keep thinking if it's making the world a better place, I can find the energy to do it. But if it's
yeah,
for no reason, I'm just going to can it, just get rid of it.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's going back to the conversation on buying things. I think a lot of people I think they fall into the narrative of, oh, I guess when you make money, you should buy things because
Yeah.
that's what people do. And then you end up in a situation where the things that you own end up owning your time because,
Yeah.
and I've seen this in my own life, if you have three homes, then you have to spend a lot of time managing those homes, and a lot of your life is just eaten away by just managing different things.
That you're
And
not
so my
enjoying.
goal is to, yeah, my goal is to really kind of own as little as not in like a monk way, but just have a life where all the things that I own are things that I really enjoy and that
Yeah.
have a purpose and not
Yeah.
just have stuff for the sake of having stuff.
That's admirable. That's inspiring, actually. You've earlier when you said it, I thought, there's a few things I could bloody ditch, could actually get rid of, and yeah, we do tend to get like that, don't we? I need this because it'll make it better, and I got a new vacuum cleaner because I thought it'd be quicker, yeah, and easier. One of the ones you don't have to plug in the battery operate.
Yeah.
And then it only gives me 20 minutes vacuum, and we've got three big dogs, and it's just so bloody pointless. And now I'm like, should I get rid of the old one? No, I don't want to get rid of the old one because this one doesn't get under the cracks. Now I've got two bloody vacuum cleaners, and it's like, oh, goddamn, I just should have kept the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I tell you what, I had a guitar. I think you love this story. When I was 15, when I was 7, I wanted to play guitar. When I was 6, actually, because my neighbour played guitar and she yodeled. She was a country singer. And I said to my mum, "Can I get a guitar? And like, I want to be like Edna." And she says, "When you're 7, if you still want a guitar, I'll get you one." So I turned 7. I was coming up to 7. Yes, I still want a guitar. So I got this guitar, this acoustic guitar, and the action was like this big, and my poor little 7-year-old fingers, were bleeding trying to play these damn guitars. But I've still got that guitar. And then when I got to 15, I don't know how I played that little guitar till I was 15, but I did. And when I was 15, I said, "Mum, I want an electric guitar." She said, "Great, jump in the car." And I thought, bloody hell, that's easy. That's fantastic. And she took me to the supermarket. Well, we got to the supermarket and I thought she was going in, and she said, Go in. And I said, "What for?" And she said, "Go and get a job. And when you get a job, you can buy that guitar." And so I did. I got a job that
That's a
back
good
in the
lesson.
days where they sent you up to the office and you fill in a form and you got a job, that sort of thing. I was getting $7 a week, and I paid that. I went and put a guitar on lay-by, and I went and paid $7 a week off that guitar, until I finally got it. And I played it for years until I got a proper job, where I could actually afford another guitar. And then I became obsessed with guitars. And there's a perfect example of you don't need that many bloody guitars. But um, and that one sort of got put in the back burner, but I've never been able to get rid of it because of the story, because of the
Yeah.
sentiment. And a couple of weeks ago, I had long story. I had a couple of guitars that come from somewhere that I ended up giving to a guy who fixes guitars because he works at a school, and I said, look, if you can fix these for the kids at the school, you might as well have them. And he said, oh, I know a couple of kids who can't afford them, so they'll be great. I said, fantastic, give them to them. By the way, I've got this guitar anyway, and he's fixed it up. And oh my God, like I feel like I've just won Tats Lotto. He's fixed up this guitar that I pretty much abandoned but I would never get rid of it. So it was just
Right.
junk hanging around the house. Now I can play it again. So sometimes that's another point. Sometimes we actually have really pleasurable, valuable stuff in our possession that we've discarded or that we just hang on to. That maybe we could bring it back to life and have a lot more joy than the other six, that we only play occasionally. Just get that one back. So yeah,
Yeah,
anyway,
I think
I love
that's
that
yeah, I
story.
think I think well, one, I think that guitar you probably really cherished it, given that you had to work for literally
Yep,
weeks of your life to
exactly.
to
Yeah.
get it. And yeah, I think your point on fixing things, that's like a very it's funny because in the era that we live, I think the instinct is if something breaks, you just throw it out and
Chuck
you
it
get
out.
another
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And I think that that's fairly new in human history because for most of it,
Yeah.
if something broke, you couldn't just go to a store and you had to fix it. Like you
Yeah.
had to figure out how to fix your horseshoe, or else
Yeah.
your horse wasn't going to be able
Yeah.
to walk. And so yeah, it's interesting. Even if I had like a rip in my pants or something, like there's no my instinct would be like, oh, I need to throw these out, and there's no reason why I couldn't just get them
Yeah.
sewn
Yeah.
because they're completely the same. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. I worked out the other day I'm still wearing clothes that are about 20 years old. I
Yeah.
said, I had these pants when I was 40, and I'm still bloody wearing them. But anyway, I don't care if they got holes, I still wear them. But so what do you what's your version of success? Like what is your definition of it?
Oh, I don't know if I've had to define that recently. I think the thing that I've always come back to that has served me well is if I, at the end of the day, can look in the mirror
Yeah.
and the person who is looking at me is proud and aligned of all of the things that I've done, then to me that's successful because
Mm,
it's hard for it's hard for me to find a kind of a hole in that because
mm,
that person who's looking at you, they are always with you. And so even when others aren't watching,
yeah.
they know
Yeah.
how you're behaving.
Yeah.
And so I think as long as you can do that, as long as you can have that, because that person's opinion matters more than anybody else's.
Yeah.
And so long as you can be proud of the things that you've done, the decisions you've made, the choices that you've taken, I think that's a pretty clean definition that I've used in my life.
I love that. Yeah, love it. Love. I don't think success is money. I don't. I think success is your values alignment. And that's exactly what you've said. It's like who am I? How am I showing up? Can I sleep straight at night? That
Yeah,
sort of stuff. And we all make mistakes because we're human. We are all going to screw up, and we're all going to hurt people too. Like without meaning to. But there's a difference between not meaning to and actually meaning to. And if we
yeah,
do it, do we have remorse and do we apologize? Do we make amends? And some people don't. And I think it's important that we do. And I think vulnerability too is really really big. Vulnerability, humility, honesty, integrity. Those things really stand out. Kindness.
yeah.
Mm,
I totally agree. Totally
yeah.
agree.
Well,
But unfortunately, those values aren't as common as
I
I would
know.
hope that they would be in our
Mm.
in our world. They're not humility and all of those values are not, they're not as sexy as some other values.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
But that's a shame, isn't it? And I think also, I think the world's full of good people, but I think the current
it is.
state of things puts people into a state of chaos and fear, where and frustration, where they're sort of leaning back into their self-protection modes. And
Yeah.
I get it. I don't blame people. I just wish. I don't know what I wish. I wish the world would just behave itself, but that's a ridiculous. That's like a fairy godmother bloody waving a magical wand thing. It's not going to happen. But I just wish we could all take this movement, where we all say, no, screw that. I'm not going to play with that. I'm going to play
Yeah.
in my lane and I'm going to move forward and just sort of bring people with us. I wish. I don't know. I can spend half my life wishing, and it probably won't change anything. But I do think, though, the way you show up, makes a difference and inspires other people to rethink
Yeah.
how they're showing up.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think you made a good point too, that there are a lot of great people that are living great lives and you don't necessarily hear from them. So that puts us in a
Yeah,
bit of position where the only people that
yeah,
you hear from are the ones that kind of want to be in the spotlight,
yeah.
and the ones that are just kind of doing the work and that are living quiet lives. You don't actually hear from them. So it kind of skews your
Yeah,
perception
it
of
does.
who everyone. It kind of reminds me of like the person that you want to be president is the person that doesn't actually want to be president because they don't want the power, and so you kind of end up in this catch 22 where the people that are running for leadership positions, political office, are probably the people that might not necessarily be the best because they desire that
Yeah,
power, and really you want the person that, like in the US case, George Washington, he was basically just like uh, if you look at his personal correspondences after he was the commander of the Continental Army, he fully expected just to go back to his farm and just basically spend the rest of his life there. So he was not expecting to
yeah,
be the leader of a new country, and he was basically called, like they were like, you have to, you're the only person that can, and he was like, fine, I'll do it. And that's I feel like
wow.
who you want to be
Yeah, yeah,
a leader, not the person who desires it, but the person who feels like obligated to do it because they view it as service,
yes,
not
yeah,
as something that's desirable. Like it really, if you're doing it, I feel like the right way, it really shouldn't be. It's more of like a burden to carry than it is like a office to hold.
yeah. I agree. And it shouldn't be a clown stage in the middle of a circus. It should be funny, Al. But anyway, we won't get it down there. James, I have loved this conversation with you. I really have. I wish we could get. I'm going to keep looking anyway to see if we can get here. But it's I think it's important because there are a lot of protein bars out there. I don't want to start bagging other companies and that sort of stuff, but if you look at some of the ingredients in a lot of the protein bars, they are ingredients you wouldn't recognize. That you can't pronounce and
Hmm.
that sort of stuff. And I think if we need protein. There was one stage in my life when I was doing all this, animal activism and thinking the only protein you could get from animals, and I was making dumb statements like, well, nobody ever died from lack of protein, that sort of shit. But we do need protein. We can get it from other sources, and I'm not trying to do a big vegan stance, but we don't have to eat animals, but whatever. But what is important is your clean stuff. That's so even when you do buy a protein bar, at least have a look at the ingredients in it. Make sure they're not rubbish. And eh, yeah, my brother-in-law won't eat anything that's not natural. And I had some Coffee Mate. You know what Coffee Mate is because it's big in America. I
Yeah.
had that in the cupboard, and I said I don't have regular milk. We don't yuck. And I said, but I've got Coffee Mate. And he said, show me that bottle. And he looked at the ingredients and he goes, what the hell is that shit? And he said, I'm not having that. I'll go black. So, I think, and then I read the ingredients and thought, holy shit, I like this stuff, but maybe I shouldn't.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. But I've loved this conversation, James, and thank you for
It's
doing
been
what you
great.
thanks for doing everything good for the world. And you're one person. You can't save the planet, neither can I, but I think the more people doing good things and continually looking for the next good thing, I think that's how we keep humanity on track. So I really
Yeah.
appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, as I think you made the point earlier that if everyone just cleans up their own little corner of the world, then you'd have a pretty clean world. So
Yeah,
the more people that do that, the better the world. But yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for taking some of your morning to talk to me, my evening.
my pleasure.
Yeah, so thank you again.
My pleasure. All right. Chat soon, James. Thank you. See
All
ya.
right, thanks.
Ta-da.
Bye.